So hello, and thank you for joining us. Welcome to this presentation, which is part of an ongoing Goose webinar series exploring aspects of global sustained ocean observing, and today, ocean forecasting. My name is Albert Fisher. I'm the director of the Global Ocean Observing System Program Office, which is headquartered here at the IOC of UNESCO in Paris. And for the next hour, we'll start with an approximately 30-minute presentation by Pierre-Yves Le Traon. Pierre-Yves is with Ifremer and Mercator Ocean, and will be speaking to us about the Copernicus Marine Environmental Monitoring Services and the link to observations. After Pierre-Yves' presentation, we'll conduct a question and answer session using the question window. You can see the question window amongst your controls for GoToWebinar. And if you ask a question, please use the Send to All button and not the Send Privately button so that we can all see your questions and not just me and Pierre-Yves. I'll be moderating and selecting and asking those questions verbally, and the question window is already open, so you can start asking clarifying questions at any time during the presentation. We're recording this session, and this and all other webinars from Goose are posted on our YouTube channel, where you can find also all the old webinars. So Pierre-Yves, thank you very much for joining us, and I'll turn it over to you for the presentation.
Okay, so thank you very much, Albert. And so I'm very pleased to have the opportunity here to provide you with an overview of the Copernicus Marine Service. So title is From Observation to Information. As the very objective of the Copernicus Marine Service is to start from observation to develop services. And here information is taken in a broad sense. It includes advanced data products, but also a major part on ocean forecasting. So, so the outline of the presentation is as follows. I will start with a brief overview of the European Copernicus program and then focus on the Copernicus Marine Service, so the vision, products, and services and application. I will also discuss the Copernicus Marine Service evolution and research and development activities, on what we did over for the first 3 years of the Copernicus Marine Service and our plan for the next 3 years. And the last part of my talk will be more focused on the essential role of upstream satellite and observation, and with some conclusion. Okay, just a few words on the European Copernicus program. So, as you may know, the European Copernicus program is a major EU undertaking to develop advanced capability for Earth monitoring. So it's organized by the European Union with a very strong satellite space component, which is delegated to ESA for the technical coordination on the operation for ESA and EUMETSAT, on a series of services dealing with the different areas of Earth observation. And there is one of them on the marine, which we'll detail later on, which is led by Mercator Ocean. That is, Mercator Ocean received a delegation agreement for the European Union to implement the service. There is also an in-situ component, and I will obviously come back to this in-situ component as well. The way it is organized, at least today at the European level, that this in-situ component is the responsibility of member states, but there is a coordination which is done at European level through delegation agreement to the European Environment Agency, but also with the support of the different delegated entity for the service, so including a Mercator Ocean for the marine. So briefly on this satellite component on Copernicus, so it's really an impressive long-term commitment for Earth monitoring from space with the so-called Sentinel mission. Its operation is a sun that is covering date from today up to 2030. So with already 5 satellites which have been launched and are working quite well. Sentinel-1 for SAR, Sentinel-2 for optical, Sentinel-3A, which is dealing with radar altimetry, ocean color, and SST, so an essential component for what we do for the marine. On next week, there will be the launch of the second Sentinel-3 mission, Sentinel-3B, to have the constellation in place, and other Sentinel missions. So it's a very important component of Copernicus as a whole, and a really unique capability developed at European level to observe the Earth from space. But Copernicus is more than just satellite observations, and really the main idea when the Copernicus was initially developed, whose previous name was GMES, is really also to develop the part on services that is taking the information from satellite observation together with in situ data to develop services for different areas of Earth monitoring, so atmosphere chemistry, marine, land, emergency, climate, and security. So Mercator is in charge of this implementation of the Marine Service. So it's running mainly on the satellite observation from Sentinel-1, Sentinel-3, JSON-3, Sentinel-6 later on, and also partly Sentinel-2 in situ data. Of course, many other satellite observation coming from the international cooperation. So that we'll detail later on in situ data, relying on many in situ observations that are collected as part of international program, as you know very much, as part of the GOOS family. So the driver of the Copernicus Marine Service, so that's, as you know, this increasing and pressing ocean monitoring needs for understanding and predicting the evolution of weather and climate, for an increasing number of ocean services on the development of the blue economy, and that is very much linked associated to a better and sustainable management of the ocean and its resources. So we have two keywords as blue growth and societal challenges here. And there is a context, as we all know, that is, I mean, these needs are very much recognized at the highest level with SDG Agenda 2030 of the United Nations, IPCC special report, OECD report, and more recently the G7 initiative on future of ocean and the sea. So the vision of the Copernicus Marine Service, it's a world-leading marine environmental monitoring service that supports blue growth and blue economy for maritime safety, effective use of marine resources, healthy waters, informing coastal and marine hazard services, and supporting climate services. So this is a broad service for the ocean. It's using and building on the operational oceanography integrated and science-based approach, that's the observation, model, ocean forecasting, and user services. The key aspect here, and I will repeat it later on, is that this exists today as an operational service, but because we have had more than 10 years of investment in the research and development precursor project, so MERCI in the past, MyOcean 1, MyOcean 2, MyOcean follow-on, but also international cooperation in the field of ocean data assimilation, ocean forecasting, in particular in the framework of GODAE OceanView, and with the new name today, Ocean Predict. And this is also key for the evolution of the service that I will discuss briefly later on, that we need to continue improve and make the best use of advance in science and technology to improve further the service. So the way it's organized today, so we have Mercator Ocean as a delegated entity from the European Union that is in charge of the implementation of the Copernicus Marine Service. So we are advised by a scientific and technical advisory committee, and we organize the different elements of this service. So this is they include system, service, outreach, science. Our main building block are monitoring and forecasting center, that's the ocean forecasting center, both for the global ocean, which is done by Mercator Ocean, plus Metofis, and also a series of monitoring and forecasting center for European seas. So we have the Baltic, the Black Seas, Bay of Biscay, and the Med Sea on North West Shelf, plus Arctic. And we have a thematic assembly center, so dealing with observation, so both satellite and in situ observation. And their goal is to prepare advanced data product, but also to prepare the data that are needed for the assimilation in ocean forecasting models. We have, in addition, two specific elements that are used to develop user uptake activity and to midterm R&D activities. It's called, and this is just so service evolution and user uptake, and I will give you some example and activities later on. Okay, so we are now, for the Copernicus Marine Service, we are entering our fourth annual cycle for the CMEMS implementation, which is the start of the second phase of our delegation agreement, which will cover the next 3 years. So today, the Copernicus Marine Service is it's state-of-the-art, innovative and user-driven service. It's operational and scientifically assessed. It's covering observation, satellite in situ and models, analysis and forecast. It covers physics, including sea ice, wave, and biogeochemistry. It's built on a network of European producers. So it's really a distributed architecture where we have almost, 40, 50 different centers in Europe that are involved in the production and many more in the research and development activity or in the downstream sector, of course. We have a single catalog, which is providing product worldwide, and European-wide as well. A central information system to search, view, download products, and monitor the system. A manned service desk to support users. We rely also on a network of technical and marine experts, which was also very key to the success and development of the Copernicus Marine Service. So this is a generic service, and it was very clear at the start of the Copernicus Marine Service that the objective was to develop a European core service, which is a generic service to serve a wide range of downstream applications. So we do not answer a specific need of a given application, but provide the core information that is needed to develop the application. On this approach has been actually quite a success. We have no more than 12,000 subscribers to the service. So what we propose is essential marine variable, physics, sea ice, wave, biogeochemistry from observation models. It's all past data, so reprocessed data, ocean reanalysis, real-time and forecast up to 10 days for the global ocean on all European region of sea. Very important to note, this is a data policy of Copernicus as a whole. This is open and free access to all products. You just need to register. And actually, we continue to have this registration process because this is really useful for us to know better who are using our products. So we have a catalog of products, almost 160 different products covering these different variables on products. So it's real time, long time, and you access you can access this product through the website and in contact with our service desk. A key aspect is also all the assessment, evaluation of product quality. So all the products that we have in the CMEMS catalog, they are documented, of course, and there is also a specific document to explain the quality of products. And this is really building on a lot of activity on the way to assess the quality of ocean forecasting system, particularly in the framework of GODAE Ocean. So we have a central service desk that provide assistance, expert support that also is used to doing a survey to monitor our users, and in particular in our 4 ocean area of benefits that we define on maritime safety, marine resources, coastal marine environment, on weather, seasonal forecast, and climate, and this single access point to the product. So as just said, so we are following our users, and they are trying to monitor them in 4 main categories. I mean, one is coastal marine environment, marine resources, weather, seasonal forecasting, and climate, and maritime safety. If we look at the user uptake, it has been we have had a constant growth of subscribers since the start of the Copernicus Marine Service 3 or 4 years ago. We now have today more than 12,000 subscribers with about 4,000 different entities. The service we provide is global. It's, of course, we have a focus on Europe, but we have users all around the world. If we look at the details on the evolution from one year to the other, I mean, it's really improving every year, developing every year. So we are quite satisfied with the uptake today, which is quite significant given the idea that we had initially to develop this core service, and we're making sure that our activity to be developed downstream. If we monitor our user depending on the 4 area of benefits, they are more or less split equally, with only marine resources, which is a more focused area of benefit with slightly less users or subscribers. We learn a lot from our users, and we have many ways to interact with the users through workshops, through releases, and so on. And there are a series of use cases that you could find on our website, and that really describe how they use the Copernicus Marine Service product for their specific application. And the interesting part here is really to realize that for many of these applications and users, they are actually using the Copernicus Marine Service together with their own data or own system, in particular for coastal application. And this is really this idea of a core service. We have, by the way, a specific, as I mentioned initially, a specific activity to develop further the interaction with our user. That's a user uptake activities, with really the overall objective is to show the integration and impact of the Copernicus Marine Service for downstream application. and really encouraging intermediate users to develop their own operational based on Siemens. So we have a specific contract, and we had the first batch of contract last year, and we very recently selected new project, and you have just example here of some of these projects which are usually dealing with coastal forecasting or coastal application. So we are providing products and services. We go also one step further in terms of assessment. So as part of the delegation agreement we signed with the European Union, we had also one objective is to develop this annual ocean state report, which is developing a state of the global ocean on European seas every year, and based on the value-added information that comes from CMM's product, and of course of scientific expertise that we gather as part of the Copernicus Marine service partners. So it's published in a peer-reviewed journal, the Journal of Forest Oceanography. The first report was published last year. It was written by more than 80 scientific experts, a lot of collaboration, independent peer review, which was organized by our stack as an editorial board, on many external reviewer, which is key for us to ensure that we have a state-of-the-art and high-quality reporting. It was a great achievement. We have the second issue, which is now in press, and actually starting the preparation of already of the third issue. And all this work is coordinating under the leadership of Karina von Schuckmann at Mercator Ocean. In addition to the ocean state report, we develop also the ocean monitoring indicators that actually will progressively feed this ocean state report. So it's not only figures, but it's also numerical data dealing with key parameters that we want to monitor and for which we want to develop useful indicator of the state of the ocean. So we started with 3 ocean monitoring indicators, obtained both from observation but also for model and ocean analysis. And this activity will be strongly developed over the coming 2 or 3 years to have more indicators based on Copernicus Marine Service product and others. We now move more briefly on the service evolution, on what we do for the evolution of the service. So, of course, this is a user-driven service, so we need to, and we are working with users so that they drive service evolution, which means collecting user feedbacks, but also most important part to translate the user requirement into achievable service objective. And this is really a key aspect on the interaction with user. We are aiming at taking into account all scientific and technological advances which are relevant to the evolution of the service, particularly satellite in situ observation, of course, but also modeling, advanced and data assimilation, and a lot of issue on technology and computing capabilities, information system on a new big data paradigm. Innovation capacity is required to attract users, and a key aspect for, at least in the European context, here is the delineation with downstream activities. So we're really focusing here on activities that are best performed at pan-European scale. So we are not replacing activities which are best done by European member states, so it's in particular dealing for the coastal oceans, that we're really trying to provide the best service to allow the development of these downstream activities, be that from a public or private sector. So service evaluation activities, so we are working with our scientific and technological advisory committee, STAC, and we developed a service evolution high-level strategy on R&D roadmap. The key aspect is to identify research and development activities, different tiers that are organized with different actors on the short-term, mid-term, and long-term. The short-term, mid-term activities are done as part of our production center, so the thematic assembly center and the monitoring and forecasting center. We organize some of the mid-term R&D activity through tenders for service evolution. And we interface with the European Commission or longer-term R&D, in particular in the framework of the H2020 research program, which again is very key for the long-term evolution of the service and for Copernicus as a whole. So one aspect is to gather user requirement. I will just mention previously that the activities that we do to interact with our users and very useful input that we get in terms of resolution, wave, and quality and type of products, but to translate this request into evolution of the service needs some thinking. I mean, user will, for instance, request very high resolution ocean current, and you have to then explain how you can get high resolution ocean current. It's not only augmenting the resolution of a model. You need to have the observation to constrain the model. So this high-level strategy, I will not detail, but they are available on the Copernicus Marine website. It really gives you the overall framework, I mean, to guide the evolution of our strategies. It identifies the different goals that are important for the strategy. We also have, in addition, define priorities for research and development activities, and we have 4 key areas of innovation that we identify. So ocean circulation, ocean waves, and ocean ice coupling, biogeochemistry, which is a key for the Copernicus Marine Service, coastal interface, and ocean atmosphere climate. So this is a service evolution roadmap. So we are now entering this phase 2. You see here the different tiers of research and development, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and how they feed progressively the service that we operate. So this is really, of course, a complex architecture when you need to work in a highly distributed system, but it's thanks to effort carried out over the past couple of years, we have a system which is working quite well. And this is the system versioning we have. So this is part of the tier 1 R&D that we organize with the main center, so Monitoring Forecasting Center and Thematica Service Center. So we have a main version every year. In phase 2, we'll have more frequent update of the system. And the key is to prepare the next version while continuing operating the previous line. So we are really here a formal review process to manage the development and entry of service of the new version. Just a few words on this service evolution research and development project that we developed. So this is the so-called Tier 2 R&D, which is done outside the main centers, MFC and TACS, and really the aim is to improve the operational service within 2 to 3 years. We had a first call, I mean, more than 2 years ago, where we selected 12 projects. They just ended last month, and we just started a new call, and we have new project, 18 projects that actually started last a couple of weeks ago. This project, actually, the first project, were really very instrumental to provide new results that will be progressively implemented during the phase 2 of the service, and I will show example later on. Okay, we just go through a few highlights of the phase 1 achievement that we have had as part of the Copernicus Marine Service. So what was added compared to what was the start of the Copernicus Marine Service, which was actually the end of the previous precursor project of MyOcean. So what we added in our portfolio, first, I mean, we added waves, observation on models, which were not part of the catalog at the start of the Copernicus Marine Service. So we now have models at global scale and at regional scale. For the ocean circulation model, I mean, we are moving progressively with a higher resolution. There was a lot to be done on the coupling between wave and circulation, and this is implemented in some of the models. Better use of satellite in situ observation. Of course, uptake of Sentinel-1, which is providing essential data for CIS and wave in the service, and Sentinel-3 for altimetry, sea surface temperature, ocean color. Longer-term series of reprocessed in situ and satellite data. Improve on more homogenized product quality assessment, which is key. We want to have something which is standardized with all CMEMS actors, which requires a lot of coordination work. And WC ocean monitoring indicator and ocean state report. And we have a summary of all this achievement, which was published last year in a Mercator Ocean journal. It's a comprehensive review of the achievement, and we invite you, I mean, to download this journal that is available on the Mercator Ocean website. One example here on one of the achievements from the Global Monitoring Forecasting Center team here at Mercator Ocean. It's showing the evolution of the sea level analysis error on a similar statistic you would get from the forecast error for the global system. And it shows how this important diagnostic improves over time. First, when you move from a higher resolution model, for instance, moving from a quarter degree model, this is a black curve here, to a 112, you really see that we improve the analysis error to a level of 5-6 centimeters, so compared to 8-9. But you also see the improvement when you move from one version to the other, even with 112 degrees from V1, V2, V3, compared to the reanalysis run here. And this is due to improved data assimilation system, new observations that we have, and this is a lot of a range of different improvements that we added to the system. And this is really key in the evolution to continue to improve further the systems. Another example here from the Mediterranean Forecasting Center team, just showing here the impact of moving to higher resolution for the physical model on the biogeochemical model. And this is just allow here to better reproduce key signal on chlorophyll data with the entering of low chlorophyll waters that enter the north through the Messina Strait. Just having one example here on the biogeochemistry, on the links with biogeochemistry and on physics. Another example on ice. So we have a lot of activity on ice here on sea ice modeling. This is the Baltic Mediterranean forecasting team, and this is one example of one of the model outputs where they were able to demonstrate that thanks to model improvement, they reproduce much better the fast ice, which here visible in the north part of the Baltic, and which compares very well with independent observed ice map. So again, one of the capabilities that were developed over time. Last example, just dealing more with observation. This is we also have a ice analysis product as part of the Copernicus Marine Service. What the Ocean and Sea Ice Stack is doing is to develop more automated analysis, taking advantage of the unique coverage of Sentinel-1, and they are developing new products that will be soon available on in the service. On one example of one of the results from this midterm Tier 2 service evolution R&D project, so we had 12 of them. This one is dealing with Wave to Nimbo. PI is Joanna Staneva, is dealing with the coupling between ocean circulation and wave. And you are here an example where taking into account this coupling improves the modeling and forecast of storm surges. Okay, a few words of what we want to do when going from phase 1 to phase 2 of Copernicus Marine Service. So our main objective when this is taken actually from the delegation agreement, technical annex of the delegation agreement that Mercator signed with the EU. So we have this phase 1 is over, and we want in phase 2 to develop further the service with, of course, first ensuring continuity, which is key to user, but also making sure when we take the to have a full uptake of Sentinel capability. We'll have very soon the constellation of Sentinel-3, which will be extremely important for us, and also to improve product and service based on phase 1 outcomes on user feedback. This also means that we also we continue very much to work on user uptake, gain new user, and also strengthen our interaction with user. This is really through workshop, info session, external meeting, user uptake activities, which is key for developing the uptake of Copernicus Marine Service product in the downstream sector. In terms of products, so what we plan to have, I will not go into the detail of this, but this is the main area of improvement we expect from the different area of benefits. So in terms of maritime transport and marine safety, it's basically moving to higher resolution in models, making sure that we have tides in all models. It's already almost the case. Ocean wave coupling, improve assimilation scheme. We'll have also new observed surface current products. It's a collaboration with ESA as part of the Globe Current products. So we will develop, take advantage of the R&D done by ESA and then put those products in operational mode. Biogeochemistry is also very important for us. We will improve biogeochemical products, assimilation of ocean color products in all of our system. We will develop the carbon component, both from models and from in-situ observation. And we also add a new micronet product. This is the result of one of these service evolution research and development projects dealing with development of a new mid-trophic level product that is extremely useful for marine resources application. For the coastal, our objective is to better meet the requirement for the coastal zone user, which means improve satellite products, new in-situ observations. Again, as part of the service evolution R&D project, we had this increased project, and this was this paves the way for implementing HF radar as part of the Copernicus Marine Service in situ data center. We also, all our activity dealing with improved model resolution are also aiming and improving the coupling with coastal models. And we want to have better strength and interface with coastal model. In terms of ocean and climate, so we continue to work on long-term series for reprocess observation and ocean analysis, both at global and regional scale, covering all different components. And we continue on these ocean monitoring indicators and ocean state report, but going from climate to ocean health assessment applications. In terms of, this was more the evolution in terms of products, in terms of services, so we want to improve our catalog, so to have additional search criteria, entry of the catalog areas of benefits and so on, new and interactive visualization, links also with other Copernicus catalogs on activity. I did not mention it before, but we are working in close collaboration with other services. So we have a strong collaboration with the climate service in terms of the what we do for the ocean climate. We're also working with the land service, Copernicus Land Service for the coastal zone and so on. And this is something we want to develop further in phase 2. And we support the development through our user tech activity and promote downstream services. There is also this new activity on the DIAS, Data Information Access Services, that are developed as part of Copernicus. So it's really a new initiative, Measure 1, and there are several DIAS platforms that are developed as part of Copernicus. Mercator Ocean is involved with ECMWF, and EUMETSAT is one of these DIAS platforms. And the idea here is to allow and facilitate the access not only of the data from the services, but also all the raw data from the Copernicus satellites and others, and to use to allow the access of cloud-based processing capabilities, so that to allow users also to develop their own application. This will be the first, the start of those DIAS platform will be this year, and obviously over the coming years, this will provide a new way to access the data and services for Copernicus as a whole. Some of the identified issues for the longer run, just to complete this overview. So our plan for post-2020, of course, it's part of the discussion that are taking place now on the evolution of the Copernicus program as a whole after 2020, and the discussion on next multi-financial framework of the European Union. So it's going to higher resolution. So the plan is for the global to move to 136 and higher resolution for the regional seas. Data simulations, a lot of issues to be developed, in particular moving toward ensemble methods and probabilistic forecasting. Ocean wave atmosphere coupling is extremely important, in particular at regional sea, but to have this ocean wave everywhere, ocean atmosphere coupling. Here the target is not to predict the weather, but to predict the ocean, and we know that we need to have this coupling in place. Coastal, I mentioned this, our willingness to develop a stronger operational interface with downstream system, which we call kind of co-production between the Copernicus Marine Service and member states and other operators of the coastal system. In carbon biogeochemistry, higher trophic level, one aspect is to move further in the marine food wave and from primary to production to higher trophic level. That's what we initiated with this micronecton product, and we see it as an area of improvement, of course, with a lot of research and development still needed. On the climate ocean, so to move to a longer term ocean analysis, but also possibly in interaction with the Copernicus Climate Service to move also to projection and scenario for the coastal ocean and ecosystem. And then all these issues related to service and evolution of this integrated platform with the DIAS new paradigm, where there will be a lot of evolution in relation to these activities. Okay, I will now the last 10 minutes go through this, focus a little on this essential role of in situ and satellite upstream observation for the Copernicus Marine Service. So just something which is obvious, but that we need to repeat and repeat, that our offer is highly dependent on the satellite and in situ observing capability. And so those observations are used to validate the ocean model, and mainly for the assimilation in the ocean model to provide integrated description and forecast of the ocean state. So we have defined our present future requirement for both in situ and satellite observation on both the service that we provide today and the evolution on service that we want to provide in the future, and that require first continuity and significant improvement of ocean observing capability. Going first on satellite observations, so we are using the satellite observations that are prepared by the Thematic Assembly Center of the Copernicus Marine Service, so sea level, SST, sea ice, ocean color, wave, and wind. There is a major contribution of the Sentinel mission, so I just mentioned previously, but also a lot of contributing missions. I just listed a few of them here, and are providing all essential observation for the Copernicus Marine Service. For in-situ observations, so we are relying on the Copernicus Marine Service In-situ Thematic Assembly Center. You have here, this center is providing data both for the global ocean and for all European regional seas. Of course, it's very strongly linked to the international networks that you are very familiar with, and you can recognize many of your the data you know very well here. So it looks like an impressive set of observations that are available. In practice, if you look, and this was done just 1 year ago, but its situation today is very similar. If you look at the data that are available in real time here for chlorophyll, I mean, it's extremely limited. So this is really a strong limitation in the way we can monitor the state of the biogeochemistry in the global ocean. So just to mention that we are working at for the in-situ observations, so very well with global networks. So this is done through the coordination of IFREMER with Sylvie Couliquin, and we are also working very much at regional level with Eurogoose on the ROSIS, and also benefiting also from activity from IMONET at DGMAR. On this, just to mention this added value chain, I also discussed this briefly previously, sorry, from observation to user. I mean, it's extremely important to realize that user requirements that do not directly translate into observation requirements. So we need to understand very well the added value chain that go from observation to user. In particular, at least at the level of the Copernicus Marine Service, the essential element here is the role of model on data assimilation. So you would have a requirement from a user. You need to translate it in an evolution of the system, let's say data assimilation system, and then from the data assimilation system to have a requirement for the observing system that are feeding the assimilation system. This means that we need to develop specific tools, and we call generic term of observation impact studies that are developed within the Copernicus Marine Service community, but also as part of GODAE Ocean View, and also a lot more specifically in Mercator Ocean, in different teams. On those impact studies, so they are needed to define and test future observing systems, analyzing the impact with the perspective of integrated systems, so it's really involving satellite in-situ data and numerical models. They also are useful to demonstrate the value of an observation network. This is extremely important for advocacy. And they're also in parallel quite important for us, I mean, to improve the way we use the observation in modeling and data assimilation system. So there are different tools. So you have the observing system evaluation. It's just assessing the impact of existing data sets on the performance of a modeling data assimilation system. So this is done usually by withholding observation and rerunning the system. There are alternative approaches that are such as DFS that we will detail here. An observing system simulation experiment here is help to design observing system and to perform preparatory data assimilation work. On this, we use two models, and one that are used to simulate observation, and the one where the observations are simulated. There are a lot of technical details on the way you do this OSSE, but obviously this is something which is quite important for developing a better understanding of the impact of observation in model, but also to help the design, and certainly something where globally the international community needs to be more active. I will give you here one or two examples here of some of the observing system evaluation. This is a study which has been performed by Mercator Ocean as part of a CNES study, just to analyze the sensitivity of our system to the number of altimeters that we assimilate. Just one example here showing that if you move from 1 altimeter to 4 altimeter, which is what, by the way, what we recommend today with the system that we are running, is you divide the forecast error by more than a factor of 2. More interestingly, if you compare what you the contribution of a force altimeter, this is just to show what is the contribution of an additional force altimeter in a system. But this is done in two different systems. One is with a 1/4 degree resolution. This is a P3 system, Mercator Ocean P3 system. And the second one is a 1/12 degree, which is the operational system we are using today. And the main message here, first, you need obviously you need a positive. You see a positive impact in terms of reduction of 7-day forecast error when you add a force altimeter, but the impact is much larger when you are working in a high resolution model. So as this is very much linked to the, as soon as your model is able to better reproduce mesoscale variability, you need to have a better constraint with observation, and this additional altimeter is then more important. There were also similar activities that were done to assess the impact of Argo. Argo has a major impact in our system because of the global nature of Argo, and all the data, of course, are assimilated in all models, global and regional models of Copernicus. This was a study which was done as part of the European EAMS project, which is an observing system evaluation done over 1 year with the Mercator Ocean 1/4 global system, and it shows the impact of assimilating Argo data and really the dramatic impact of assimilating temperature and salinity data from Argo in terms of reduction of forecast error, innovation skill for the temperature and salinity. There are ongoing studies that are done as part of the Atlantos H2020 project to also do observing system simulation experiment to assess the potential of the extension of Argo. I'll just show you here one example of the work which is done here at Mercator Ocean by Florent Gasparin and co-author. It's really dealing with assessing the impact of extension of Argo up to 4,000 meters or 6,000 meters. And you are here the differences on the way you can reproduce the mean oceanic content over 1 year. The upper figure is if you assimilate all observation, which actually includes Argo, but from 0 to 2,000 meters, satellite altimetry, the actual constellation as of today, on the sea surface temperature and so on, mooring, everything. On the figure, the middle on below show the error with extension of the deep Argo up to 4,000 meters or 6,000 meters for the deep ocean from 2,000 to 4,000 meters or for the abyssal ocean. Just the main message here that we see with the system we have and with the assimilation system that are used today in an operational mode, a very significant impact on the assimilation of deep Argo data as designed today by the International Argo Program, which is about one third of the float going very deep. And this really improves very much the way we can represent the mean structure and variability of the deep ocean. And finally, we're also working on new future satellite techniques. There are discussions taking place today within the European Commission and the European Space Agency on how should the Copernicus satellite component evolve for the after 2030. And there are discussions on the potential of SWOT altimetry, which will be demonstrated with a SWOT mission. And you have here one example of a study which is done by Mounir Benkiran and co-author on the impact of SWOT data for ocean analysis and forecasting, showing really a very significant impact compared to the present constellation of altimetry. And we are working as part of an ESA study on analyzing the impact of a constellation of 2 SWOT type altimeter for ocean analysis and forecasting. And this is very much related to the fact that we know that we want to improve the resolution to better reproduce key aspect of the ocean dynamics, but without observation to constrain those signals. This will not work. So this really means that we need to move to this higher resolution observing system. So we define our requirement for the long term of Copernicus. This is available, and this was discussed with the European Commission, also with ESA. And this is a different element that I will not detail here, but it's really covering the different aspects of the satellite observations that will be ultimately needed for the Copernicus Mine Service and its application. Similarly, we are working on the requirement for in situ observation. So as previously mentioned. So we have critical sustainability gaps, sampling gaps, and major gap for biogeochemistry. So we provided the general requirement, in particular for Argo and its extension, but also for all observation in European regional seas. And we are working today with European Environment Agency and Eurogoose in the framework of the future European Ocean Observing System, EOS, to address these gaps and try to consolidate, improve in situ observing system. What we are actually planning this year is to carry out a more detailed analysis on CMEMS requirement together with Eurogoose, and this will be an input to EOS, but also we expect it as an important input to the discussion for OceanOps 19. Okay, so conclusion. So it's so Copernicus. So we have had, I think, a quite successful initial phase. The system is operational. There is a very good user uptake on R&D achievement. We have a service evolution strategy, which is based on user need and science technology advance. The service evolution is strongly linked to the evolution of observing system. Here on these aspects, the CMEMS specific role is to provide requirement with an integrated system perspective, impact assessment, but also to work on the advocacy for in situ observing system and satellite observing system. I mentioned the essential role of research and development activity on the different tiers of research and development activity, and the need to establish very solid links with the research community. Some outline of the CMEMS phase 2, which is service continuity, but significant evolution. And we are working today on the post-2020 evolution with a lot, of course, today still a lot of question mark, but with many good ideas on the way we could move forward with a service for better service for users. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pierre-Yves. That's a very informative, very dense talk, and I'll inform the audience that the question window is open. Please feel free to ask your questions, and I'll start with a few of my own. Pierre-Yves, you showed a map of all the users, your 12,000 registered users around the world, and they did come from around the world, even if there was a concentration in Europe. So can anyone be served by the Copernicus Marine Service Desk, or do you have to be based in Europe?
I mentioned this is a data policy of Copernicus as a whole. This is open and free for everyone. You just need to register, but it's you get a full access to all data for the Copernicus Marine Service. But as I mentioned, we still have a registration process, which actually is a very light one. And we had several iterations with our user just to make sure that it is minimum, but it's also very useful for us so that we can interact with our users. But yeah, it's totally open and free for everyone.
You talked about some of the outreach R&D activities to try to develop the intermediate users, develop those that are developing information downstream. Are those all based in Europe, or is there any possibility to have those outside of Europe?
We have a few examples of activity which are outside of Europe. It's open tenders from our side, so it's and we really want to make sure that the Copernicus Marine Service, and remember the initial name of Copernicus was GMES, and the G was global. So this we're dealing with global services. So it's it's open to everyone.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, it seems like there's a lot of potential in the fact that you're providing these global forecasts to then develop information that can be used in a more local context downstream. Yeah. So that's very nice to hear. I want to ask you, you talked about the timescales of well, you didn't say too much about the timescales of the forecasting services provided from the Marine Service. But obviously, we're moving more and more towards seamless forecasting. So on the shorter time scale towards weather side, and on the longer time scale towards climate side. What is the connection between the Copernicus Marine Environmental Monitoring Service and climate services or weather services on both ends?
Well, today, so within Copernicus, so the Copernicus Marine Service is doing, of course, the ocean and the short-term ocean forecasting. Seasonal forecasting is part of the climate service today, so it's run by ECMWF. And as I mentioned, in the long-term evolution, we could possibly develop joint activity because we know that there are user need to forecast the evolution of the coastal ocean and the ecosystem. But this is a way it is separated today. But in practice, there are common tools that are used. I mean, the modeling tools are almost the same. We are more or less all using the NEMO models, and there are also commonalities that are developed in data assimilation. The use of the data are also very similar. I mean, that's So there are, I mean, links between the different services, but there's a way today it is organized. It's true for us, which is a bit specific, is that we have to, in particular on what I mentioned, to this issue of this, we want to have, for instance, seamless prediction and analysis for the coastal ocean, but this needs to be organized with different actors. So this is where it's more the coupling of with external coastal models, but in practice we will never do at European level a system that is doing everything. We have to focus on what is best done at European level.
Okay. We have a question from Jorge Vasquez about once you're registered, what's the main form of data distribution to users?
What's the, sorry?
What is the format of the data distribution to users?
Oh, I mean, we are many using NetCDF, I mean, the format, and, but the good thing is it's very homogenized between the different data set you can access. So, I mean, could just encourage you to do a test and interact with our service desk. And, but only we get all the information on the website.
So you were just talking about the link and the extension into the coastal regions and that interface that needs to be developed over the coming years. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? What are really the big challenges, and are there enough observations in the coastal ocean to constrain the combined system coming from the open ocean into the coastal waters?
Well, there are many challenges. I mean, not only in observation, but also in modeling, in also the way we couple with hydrology models, with for river inputs and so on. That's the reason why we are quite active in first in our user tech activity, but also in research and development activities. And there are many projects ongoing today. I didn't mention all the projects that are done as part of H2020, but there are 2 or 3 dealing with evolution of the services to better under the coastal areas. Obviously, there are issues for observation, and, but in particular for biology, biogeochemistry. But it's, I think there are a lot of progress which is done today in the way we can model and forecast the coastal zone. So there is a lot of challenge, of course, but given what we have today with the evolution of satellite observing systems, the evolution of modeling data simulation tool, but in situ will be a problem. We have actually, if you look today with the data that are available from the in situ observation, you actually get some data which are very close to the coast, and this is part of the monitoring program that all countries have to, let's say, to monitor the quality of the water and so on. But you have really a strong gap when you move this EEZ, and there are lack of key observation there. And really, the focus should be more on this gray zone between the open ocean and on the coastal zone. Of course.
So there's a kind of space
that it's
the observations between basin scale and sort of across the shelf. Is that the area?
Yes, really coastal shelf observation. So particular. So I mentioned the HF radar, which is an obvious example where there are good development ongoing, but you know, the development of glider lines, the development of ferry box. So Europe is quite active here with different projects. We still face, at least at European level, I mean, sustainability issues. I mean, we have very good example of several lines working well, but really to improve and maintain those systems is always challenging. This is one of the hope of this European Ocean Observing System, to try to stabilize and to have a framework to ensure this continuity.
So you mentioned one of the new products you have is Ocean Indicators, and we have a question from Roberto Sabia about this. Can you comment a bit more on the features of the OMI indicators, their evolution, and what future variables you're going to address out of?
Yes, so what we started with the obvious one, which are sea level, sea ice, sea level rise, sea ice concentration, and sea ice thickness, on oceanic content. For example, for oceanic content, what we have is we have several analysis products as part of the Copernicus Marine Service, so which is done in cooperation with several important centers in Europe. So what we do is an ensemble estimation of the content, and we have the estimation also of the spread of the ensemble, which provide extremely useful information of this on the accuracy. And what we provide is not only a figure of the evolution of the global oceanic content, or even on the trend of the oceanic content, but we also provide numerical data that can be used by anyone. For sea level, it's so the long-term evolution of mean sea level plus a regional variation for the different the global and regional scale. And for sea ice, it's sea ice concentration, which is mainly based from satellite observation, which are well known already, but also some sea ice thickness information coming from models. And the plans today is also to move towards new indicators. So we are working with all Copernicus marine centers to develop a new indicator, of course, on ocean color, possibly on waves. And we want progressively to develop indicators that will be more relevant to some key application, let's say aquaculture, which could be related to the evolution of the temperature, for instance. So this is something we will discuss, very soon, and we are developing a plan, for the next coming years for this indicator. And the idea that they will help us to have this, because we want to have this ocean state report activity on an annual basis, and they need to be fed with regular monitoring activities that will be provided in part through these indicators.
So just continuing on the topic of indicators, we have a question from Paolo Cipollini, which is about, are you considering any global indicators for biogeochemistry?
Yes, actually, we are working on, we have a plan actually to work on, let's say, on pH, on RC flux of CO2, so working with SOCAT community and others, and also using both observation, reconstruction, on models, and this is one of the plans we have for next year. To come with an indicator on the RC flux of CO2 on pH. The other one is what I've mentioned previously on the ocean color on evolution of primary production. And it will be at each time we are working both with observation model and trying to find the best compromise between the different types of observations. But we have to make sure that we can evaluate the accuracy of the indicator we provide.
Yeah. There's quite a lot of questions coming in. I'm not going to be able to ask them all because we're starting to run out of time, but I want to ask some questions about the link to the observations. So that was the theme of your last part of your talk, that the user requirements with the users that you're dealing with don't directly translate into observation requirements, but you have to go through the value chain to get back to what is needed in terms of observations. And both I and Dorothee Bakker have a question about the sustainability of the observations. As you know, a lot of the observations that go into these products are still funded by research budgets, and their sustainability is fragile. So what is your feeling about the sustainability of the observing system, and what can we do through the connection that you make to users to try to improve that sustainability?
Yeah, I think this is a key point. As explained, so we are not, as part of the Copernicus Marine Service, and neither the Copernicus program as a whole is providing funding for in-situ observation. So here it's mainly advocacy, but it's on working also with the different actors. So really what we are preparing on having high-level messages to the European Commission, but also to member states that, okay, this in-situ component is critically essential, and without in-situ observation, we cannot really run a service like Copernicus Marine Service. So it's really trying to advocate better on the impact relationship between the service we provide and the in-situ observation. And the same also from the satellite community. The ESA, EUMETSAT, but it's more from the perspective of using in-situ observation for satellite calibration and validation. So we have an avenue here through Copernicus to promote and explain the essential role of in-situ, and we are quite active at the Mercator Ocean level together with Euroboost, because we are really teaming up here to advocate for the evolution of the in-situ observing system. And I think that the initiatives that we have with EOS and Oceanops 19 that are coming will be key, to put again this high-level message and making sure that we can sustain the in-situ observing system. We have a few examples in Europe where we could achieve part of sustainability through the development of research infrastructure. Of course, it's not perfect and it's still challenging, but we have the development of a kind of long-term commitment from different European countries. For some element of the in-situ observing system, but we need to do much more on this really is, I think this is really a collective work for all of us.
And maybe one more connection about the connection back to observations. You have this layer of data thematic assembly centers before you come to the forecast systems themselves, and they are integrating satellite and in situ data. And do you have some messages or some challenges related to the integration of those two data streams that you can tell us about from that phase?
It's really more, I mean, the way we do, it's more dealing here with the data assimilation. The thematic assembly center are providing high-level products in addition to the data they provide for the data assimilation system that are directly used by user on application. I mentioned this CIS analysis, for instance. But here, I mean, the main challenge I see is more the way to best use satellite and in-situ data together with the assimilation system, because this usually has a major impact in the way you design your system. And I did not show, I have no time to show example of this observing system simulation experiment that we carried out. I mean, depending if you assimilate or not altimetry in your system, the answer on the requirement you have for the in-situ observing system will not be the same. And if you use a model, and models do have some skill if the wind are sufficiently well known. So this is really the integrated approach is essential for an improved design of the observing system.
All right, thank you very much, Pierre-Yves. We've actually run out of time. Go ahead.
I wanted to just take one minute, if it's possible, just to advertise the GeoBlue Planet Symposium, which actually will deal very much with the discussion today, and which is linking ocean and coastal observation with societal needs. On this Blue Planet Symposium, which can be also an event in Europe that can prepare the OceanOps 19, will be held in Toulouse the first week of July. So I invite many of you to come to this symposium. The agenda is now, there's a preliminary version of the agenda which is now available on the website. And we have a deadline for poster submission end of April. So we are welcoming very much poster on observation information product on user on application.
All right, thank you very much, Pierre-Yves. Yeah, I would also encourage those in the audience to consider going to this symposium, really focused on the connection to users out of observations. So thank you again, and apologies I couldn't get to all the questions. We will be posting this video, and with Pierre-Yves' permission, also the slides for you to look at, because it was very dense, a lot of information. And our next webinar is also on forecasting systems. It's by Tom Cuff on the 1st of June at the same time as this webinar on the importance of observations to marine weather forecasting, so looking at different forecasting systems and shorter time scale. Thank you very much, Pierre-Yves, again.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.